Yeah, great. Look, good morning. I'd like to welcome you to our High Performance Centre for our Women in Rugby update. I'd like to start by acknowledging the tremendous efforts of Nicola Friday and the Ireland team in the Women's Six Nations campaign. The players put everything they had into representing their country, and Irish rugby could not have asked more of them. While this was not their time, we are confident that their time will come. The IRFU accepts responsibility for the challenges in women's rugby and will, as a matter of good practice, continually assess and reassess how we can improve. As I have said before, we are on a journey, and while there may be setbacks along the way, our commitment to the women's game and to women in the game is unwavering. Since the publication of the Women in Rugby report last December, there has been positive progress on both fronts, but there is still much work to do. All recommendations have been or are being implemented. For example, we recently appointed our first head of EDI, Anne-Marie Hughes, who will talk a little bit later. A key objective is the development, training, and implementation of best practice policies and protocols to ensure Irish rugby is as safe, inclusive, and welcoming as possible. Later this month, we will also appoint a new chair to lead the revised Women's Advisory Group, which will have oversight of the delivery of the new Women's Strategic Plan. This will include, for the first time, at least 3 independent members who have expertise in women's rugby and/or women's sport. We are also developing policies and reporting mechanisms to provide confidential channels for anyone involved in the game who has experienced discrimination or harassment. By September, more than a third of the senior management team in the IRFU will be female, and there is a commitment to bring gender balance of 40% on the union committee by the end of this year. This is just a sample of initiatives underway to maximise performance, access, and participation in the game, and to modernise our governance. Together with the outputs from ongoing consultation across the game, all recommendations will feed into a new strategic plan for rugby in Ireland to be published later this year, which will concentrate on future-proofing the game. Contrary to some commentary, the IRFU's stewardship of the women's game is in good hands. It is comprised of women and men elected from our clubs and provinces, all of whom care deeply for the game and player well-being at all levels. It also includes 240 committed staff from 15 nationalities, 35% of whom are women. In building rugby long-term, we know it is important to include a cross-section of voices from diverse backgrounds, education and perspectives from within and outside the game. As CEO, I am personally committed, as are my leadership team and the union committee, to doing everything we can to ensure that Irish rugby is as high-performing and inclusive as possible. We understand that discrimination is an issue for every sport and every business. But unconscious bias and all instances of exclusion are unacceptable, no matter what form they take. The IRFU Women in Rugby report, published at the end of last year, in December, Chapter 1, Page 1, identified this issue and also set out plans to tackle it. We have been acting on this report since its publication and are determined to ensure a safe, inclusive, and welcoming environment as possible in all levels of our game. When I consider the commitment of volunteers and professional staff to the women's game, together with increased financial resources and the unwavering support of Irish fans, I see much cause for realistic optimism. Of course, our national women's 15s team is the focal point for many, but beneath that, there are green shoots in participation and pathways. For example, there has been a 10% increase in female and male players across our game since COVID to almost 250,000 participants. The total number of women's teams has more than doubled since 2018, from 190 to 470. There are now almost 43,000 girls each and every year involved in our Aldi Play rugby programmes. And we have more than doubled our direct investment in women's rugby to 6.4 million this year. Have we delivered everything? No. We have much more to do. And yes, we would like to fast-track that journey as much as possible, especially now that COVID-19 is well behind us. But progress is being made. The IRFU also wants especially to sustain the confidence of our players on this journey. The prize is enormous and will be worth the effort. I am confident that through effective leadership, collaborative partnerships, and building improved structures, processes, and pathways, some of which you've heard about earlier from Larissa, more women and girls will have the opportunity, interest, and support to play rugby in Ireland to the best of their ability. This will in turn lead to increasing numbers of girls playing in schools, clubs, and colleges, and having the opportunity to represent Ireland on the world stage. In closing, let me reiterate our commitment not just to our players and all in the women's game, but to being available to you, the media, to address your queries on all aspects of the game. We do appreciate your interest and the opportunity as the NGB over the sport to put forward our position on matters that are critical to the game. Finally, I would like to wish our Ireland Women's Sevens team the very best of luck in Toulouse this weekend as they bid to qualify directly out of the World Series for the 2024 Olympics. Now, I think that's something we would all like to see. I'm happy to pass back to Peter.
Thank you very much. I'll just kick off with questions for each of the panelists and introduce them. Fiona Steed, Chair of the Women's Subcommittee, everyone will know. Gillian McDarby is the Head of Performance and Pathways, and Anne-Marie Hughes, as Kevin has said, is our new Head of Equity, Diversity and Inclusivity. So Fiona, if we could just start off, since our last meeting for the Women in Rugby report in December, there have been a few changes across domestic competitions. Could you just outline some of the steps that have been taken and an update on the Women's AIL structures, please?
Yeah, so thanks Peter, and thanks, it is great to see everybody here. Obviously the recommendation from the report was the 6 and 6 model, that we'd have, you know, more or less a premiership and a championship of 6 and 6. So initially when I say we, the Women's Subcommittee, which I chair, and the staff that work in the domestic game, because this is about domestic rugby, we approached the clubs in the form of a forum to, I suppose, get their initial views as to what they thought of this. Now, I suppose it's dispersed in terms of what people want and what the views of the clubs. So at the moment there's 9 clubs. 4 of them were like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea if it's well supported. The other 5 were absolutely no, we can't have this, we don't want this. Okay, so straight away then you have an imbalance of what the clubs want, the players want, and what the report recommended. So out of that, then we broke it up and we met each of the clubs individually, because when you're in a group situation, obviously there can be a little bit of groupthink, there can be dominant voices that speak on behalf of the clubs, even though they're not perhaps speaking on behalf of the clubs. So that was broken up then, so each club was given individual meeting time with staff and members of the committee to actually look at, well, what did they want, what were they looking like. Then we came back together after that in terms of bringing everybody back into the room. And between this, Gillian, obviously in her role, and Amanda Greensmith, who is, I suppose, the Women's Development Manager for the domestic game, they had, I don't know how many meetings and conversations to look at what it would look like in terms of the Celtic Challenge and that expanding to 2 teams, and how could we provide opportunities for everybody. So you see there on your notes, and I'm used to sort of remembering figures, but you have them there in front of you, there's about 3,000 adults, women, playing rugby. So that's a lot of women that need competition and need quality competition. Not just the players in the AIL. So when you look at domestic rugby, you're looking at everything from the AIL back, and then we also need to look at from the AIL forward into the Interpros and into performance. So a lot of work was done behind the scenes. We then had, we had a proposal went through, from the Women's Subcommittee to the Rugby Committee. And when you hear stuff about, the Women's Subcommittee and who's leading it and who's this, so this is me, I'm it, okay? And when my credibility is questioned, I'm sort of like, really? Okay, that's fine. People can question, and I'm happy to be questioned, but I think I have the knowledge, the experience, the depth of rugby in me to chair that committee and to bring, I suppose, all the stakeholders to I suppose, together and to work for that. So just in case anybody was in doubt as to who was chairing that women's subcommittee, that's me. So then I brought it to the rugby committee, a proposal that actually we would stick with the 9 teams for this coming season. That was following all the consultations with the clubs. And to be fair to the rugby committee, of which I sit on, everybody was supportive of that situation. We went back to the clubs then to say, okay, it looks like we will stick with the 9. Are ye happy with this? Yes, and we want 18 games or whatever the 9, they play each other, all of that, home and away. That's what they asked for, was to play home and away full 18 games of the season. So we were like, okay, let's look at that, and we started to draw up a season plan. The competitions manager, Amanda Orla, looked at what that was like, and then we, I suppose, Gillian, informed us it was going to be definitely 2 teams. That would then be an 11-week window for the Celtic Challenge. Okay, so now in a couple of weeks this will all be out there in terms of what the season plan looks like. But if you imagine up to Christmas, it's fine. You have your interpros, okay, which sit at the start of the season as the pathway for performance for selection for the WXVs. Then the AIL starts when after the Interpros. The clubs looked for at least a 2-week window after the start of the Interpros, so we've been able to facilitate that. Then you go into the AIL. The WXVs will go on at the same time. There's an acceptance from all of the clubs that the highest level won't necessarily be available, so the players that are playing at international standard will not be available for the AIL in these windows. Okay, and I think that's more or less accepted. Move on to Christmas. We were criticised last year for stopping, or this season, but last year for stopping at Christmas, and what everybody wanted, the home and away. So what we put in then was home and away. So that meant after Christmas there was going to be a lot of clashes. So the clashes would be the 11 weeks where the Celtic Challenge, 2 teams. So you're looking at between 50 and 60 players being out of that AIL window. But you still have 9 teams with a squad of 30, 40 players. But, it is 50 or so coming out of the AIL clubs. So obviously the clubs then went, whoa. And especially the clubs that have, I suppose, the amount of international players, they were like, okay, now we want to go back to a split, and can we just finish before Christmas and have a split season and then play top 5, bottom 4? So you have some clubs, and this is what engagement is, isn't it? And this is what consultation is. But some clubs who definitely wanted the 18 were now like, no, let's stop at Christmas and let's have a 5 and a 4. Again, we went back and we had an in-person meeting, which was fantastic. It's great to be able to sit down with people, isn't it? And actually have the chats and the tea. Better tea than what we had here today, though, I have to say, because that wasn't the best. But it was down in Cork, so there's good tea in Cork for anybody that wants good tea. So we met them down there again, and I went round the room. So all of the clubs were represented by a player and a director of rugby or club official. So they were all in the room, and I went round the room and I said, okay, so what do you want? Do you want a split season, finishing at the real season at Christmas? So it was sort of like 3-3-2, and one club had dropped off because they were on TV, had dropped off the call. And a couple of clubs wouldn't answer, wouldn't say what their actual preference was. So I said, oh, that's okay. Look, they want to go back and consult their own members, etc. That's all fine. So we sent out an email then and a survey to say, right, let's name it, lads. What do ye actually want? Came back in, and I kept it here so that I could remember it. So 5 teams came back with, we would like 18-week AIL, okay, regardless of everything else that's happening. 3 teams came back with the split. 1 team didn't reply, okay, and that's fine. People are, I suppose, entitled not to reply, but it doesn't help the decision-making process when you don't have replies to direct questions. So you can see here then there's a whole piece, isn't there, that the clubs differ in what they want, and I understand the reasons for that. So then it is up to, I suppose, the IRFU, both the staff and the volunteers that work in that, to look at what's best for everybody that wants to play rugby in Ireland in a domestic competition. We do want a high standard, high performing WAIL, but it's not a performance competition in terms of the way that the report laid out. So where we're at now and is we worked with Gillian and performance and Amanda and domestic rugby in terms of the minimum impact to the WAIL. So what we've almost landed on is that there will only potentially be 4 clashes, okay, with the Celtic Challenge. But what we're going to do in 3 of those clashes is going to be an AIL Cup within that, so that we're not actually impacting the WAIL, which will filter around it, and there'll be only one direct clash. And then I'll finish shortly. Last night then I met with with Amanda and Orla and the chairs of the women's subcommittees in the provinces, because what we need to do as well is align the domestic regulations to allow fluidity of players. So dual status, we're trying to align it across the provinces, so that if the AIL clubs are challenged because people are away, can players stepped up from a provincial club, you know, that isn't in the WAIL, to allow a little bit more movement, because these are also things that were levelled at us over the past couple of seasons. So we're nearly there on that as well. So where we'll probably get to in the next week or so, we'll meet the clubs again. That hasn't been set yet because this was last night and today is just this morning after. We'll meet the clubs. We will present then what will probably be taking all of that information and all the sidebar conversations and the sidebar meetings that, you know, aren't official ones but that we're all doing, and we'll present then a WAIL season plan for this season and next. So we're going against what the report suggested, which is 6 and 6. That was following consultation. It was also following going to the clubs outside of the WAIL. So who's available to step up? So each of the chairs in the provinces of the women's committees went out to all of the other clubs in the provinces, because you need to have the players that will come up, don't you? You need to have the clubs that will be able to come up. Was there interest in other clubs in playing in the AIL? There is some, okay? So they will need to be supported, and that's something that we'll do collectively. The plan would be at the end of next season, following the winners of each of the 4 provincial leagues, there will be some format of provincial, you know, the winner, like very much like the men, and I could get shot now for saying we're following the men, but some of the things that the men do, they do quite well, you know, and we can take snippets of that and I suppose modify it to what we need to achieve for the women's game. So there will be a winner that will go up into the WAIL for next season, which will be a 10-season league. Will I stop now, Peter?
That'd be great. No, thanks very much. No, this is a lot.
It's comprehensive.
It's complicated as well.
It is.
Look, thanks very much. We'll come back to another in a moment. Gillian, we're announcing today new provincial appointments. We heard from Larissa earlier. Can you just outline their roles, responsibilities, and just a general high performance update if you can, please? Thank you.
Yep, so within Leinster we will have Matt Gale as the talent coach, and we'll have Greg Holmes as the athletic performance coach. Connacht is Larissa and Anne Caffrey. In Munster we're going to have Niamh Briggs and Lorna Barry. And then in Ulster we'll have Neil Alcorn and Paul Peasley. So they'll be responsible for managing the programme, for running it, for coordinating it, for developing the skills, the athletic performance side of the athlete as well, and then aligning with coaches within clubs and provinces, so that we're all kind of going in the same direction. Because what we want to do is make sure that when we have an influence on players, that we're actually giving them the right information and we're giving them the right skill set to actually progress.
Anne-Marie, the IRFU is also today announcing a zero tolerance policy towards bullying and harassment. Can you just outline what people can expect from that, and do you feel the IRFU is doing enough regarding what is, I suppose, a societal as well as a sporting issue?
Yeah, I suppose along with today's statement, we've had the RUGBY programme in place since late 2017, and a charter for rugby that outlined our values since 2018, and every member signs up to that since 2020. So today is really about reiterating those values and about our intolerance to discriminatory behaviour across the game.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll open up to broadcast. That's okay. Claire, do you want to do that?
Yeah, Kevin, just wondering, how damaging do you think the headlines and the negative stories that we've seen over the last weeks, months, years have been to the game and trying to attract young girls into the sport?
Yeah, they certainly haven't helped. We'd like to, if we can, put them behind us, as you've heard today, and we'll hear on an ongoing basis the excellent work that's now going on to turn things around and build for the future. But yes, it hasn't helped, and to be honest, you know, it has impacted on staff and volunteers quite a bit, and I'd be concerned about them. But I think there's an enthusiasm and a commitment to the plan that we've put in place. We can't keep looking backwards. We have to move forward, and I'm confident that what we are putting in place should prove successful.
Obviously, as you're aware, there's been accusations of sexist culture in the IRFU, bias, conscious or unconscious. Is that true?
Well, it's a societal issue. I don't believe there is, certainly in the organisation I'm leading, sexism isn't a problem. We have processes and procedures in place to deal with any allegations of that within the organisation. So I don't think it is a problem within the IRFU. But on a more widespread basis across Irish rugby, of course, like society, there are cases of it, unfortunately. We highlighted that in our report last December, and we've set out a plan to deal with it. And Anne-Marie's appointment is a direct response to that issue, which we hope will address it. As I said earlier, Irish rugby, we want to be welcoming and inclusive for everybody, and that's certainly the commitment I'm giving and Irish rugby is giving.
Just a sense then, like, bring it down to a situation like with Gillian Maloney, who was a person who spoke out in the past, and it appears that she will suffer greatly for that because she appears to be in great form for the club but has been excluded from the national setup. So, is she being silenced, or is it a message to others? Well, if you speak out,
No.
there's going to be consequences?
No, it's not. I mean, I'm not going to comment. I don't get involved in selection. That's a matter for the high performance and the coaches. But it's certainly not the case that Gillian Maloney has been silenced by the IRFU for speaking out. That's not the case, certainly.
Well, why isn't she included then in setups? Do you know what I mean? It's obviously puzzling to a lot of people why someone like that would be left out.
I think that's a question for the high performance and the coaching staff. I don't get involved. It's a selection issue. It's for them.
Claire, could I come in on that, just because obviously I was on that side of the camera, and I would have publicly criticised the IRFU, when I worked for RTE and others as well. And I suppose I'm proof positive that you can criticise and you can be accepted. And I think my choice, and I listened in terms of all of the fantastic panellists that were on during the Six Nations, and I think it's good to question. And I think that for me, certainly, coming in off the back of, 2017, and I remember up on Belfast, and myself and Lynn, and we had a robust discussion, on the national broadcast around where we were going and stuff, and it was a conscious decision of mine to leave that piece and come into the committee and make a difference and make a change. And that's what we need to encourage, and it's how you question, and it's the way you question, and it's being heard and being listened to, and I think that's really, really important. So I'm not obviously speaking about Cliona, I'm speaking about people that have asked the questions, and I continue to ask the questions, in every forum, and I can say that I'm fully respected. I don't always get agreement in what I'm asking for. I don't get that at home either, by the way, so it's and I think it is having that, I suppose, representation around the table, and be that in the committee room, be that wherever, where the right questions are being asked and people are treated respectfully and robust discussions are had, and there certainly are loads of those. And I mean, I have to say, I wouldn't put the time and effort that I put in to this and to this role if I didn't believe in Kevin and Niall and John, and what they bring and their commitment to women's rugby in the country, because I certainly wouldn't sit here if I didn't believe it.
Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah, hi, I'm here from Ottawa. Could I just ask what your response was to the Daily Telegraph article about a prominent figure in the Irish rugby making comments about who gives an F about women's rugby in Ireland? And also, do you think that the IRFU have a lot of work to do in the position of people believing in the IRFU and the support of women's rugby?
So I guess in my response to the article, obviously nobody likes negative criticism, but the alleged statement by somebody at the dinner certainly doesn't represent the views or the position of anybody involved in the IRFU that I'm working with or in the wider union committee. I do accept for sure, I think we need to communicate better. I think we need to communicate what our organisation is truly like, which is far more diverse, inclusive than is portrayed by some. So I was disappointed with the article, and I was disappointed that it gives an impression in relation to the IRFU, that simply isn't the case. But the comments are not reflective of what we stand for sure.
And how did it come to this, that a country who won a Grand Slam in 2013, you know, we're in a World Cup semi-final, 2014, and here we are in 2023 with the wooden spoon in the Six Nations?
I guess we are really disappointed with how things have progressed over the last number of years. But what I'm focused on, or have been focused on for the last 16 months, is addressing any shortfalls in the system. And I'd like to think we are starting to do that in a meaningful way with everything we're doing. And I'd like to look forward, and hopefully any failings in the past have now been firmly addressed, and we can look forward to a more positive outcome in the years ahead for sure. Okay.
Yeah, Kevin, there's obviously a massive amount of context around the Women's Six Nations campaign in terms of selection and all that. And as you said yourself, they gave everything they had. Given that, and people from the outside could say they played the part, that was five defeats was a bit. Why is the coach fired or moved on? Or what was lacking in his performance that he had to leave?
As soon as the tournament was over, we met with Greg, and we both agreed that it was time to bring in a new voice for the team. We thank Greg for everything he has done, but collectively it was felt it was time for a new voice, and we just made that collective decision. So we thank him for everything he has done, but it's the right decision at this point, we believe.
And how is this, what stage is the search for a new coach, or when do you expect to have news on that?
I might just step in there. First of all, it was a mutual decision with Greg. He wasn't fired. Just wanted to put that out there.
Has he finished his contract?
It was a mutual decision with both of us. Yeah. And just in terms of his replacement, John McKee is currently head coach at the moment, and we've actually started the process, so it'll take us a couple of months to get the